After releasing my first video on the topic of Quest 3 controller tracking being worse compared to other devices that I use like the Rift S and Quest 2, which I respectively put thousands of hours in standalone and PCVR, about a month I was able to update my Quest 3. I went from V57 to V59, and maybe the issue was fixed as I saw multiple users comment and post on other forums about tracking being massively improved after updating their headset. It's been almost 2 months since the release of Quest 3. Also worth noting that there were reports of users turning off hand and body tracking within the Quest setting and seeing improved tracking with less inconsistencies. I did this as well. With updating my headset and turning off body and hand tracking, my experience with the Quest 3 controllers are still inconsistent. I want to dive into the technicals a little bit more, along with how the biggest culprit on Quest 3 tracking for me and many other users is the left controller, or raising your controllers at eye level, controllers start to drift as well. And look, for the most part, most users, if you're new to VR or aren't competitive, you should be fine. It's something you start to notice the more you try to sweat in games, or if you do fitness games like Les Mills Body Combat or Thrill of the Fight. A lot of games that I play that have issues are not unplayable. Just when you start to get a new high score, or you're in a 1v1 situation and you're both at similar skill level, you being on Quest 3 could lead you to losing, since the controllers act up from time to time. I played Gazzlers, Islanders, Power Wash Simulator, Assassin's Creed Nexus VR. Most single player games and less movement intensive games are fine for the most part. The reason why I find this an issue to begin with is that at MetaConnect 2023, removing the tracking rings was a pretty big deal. Aesthetically and physically, the Quest 3 controllers are better, no denying that. I prefer ringless controllers, not to the expense where I can no longer beat my Saber accurately. However, that is without its faults. With moving the tracking to the faceplate of the controllers and adding a single IR LED at the bottom, now instead of relying on the IR LED system, it now relies on tracking algorithms. Quest 2 and Quest 3 tracking uses 3 main methods to improve how inside-out tracking works. And obviously, I'm not an engineer yet, but as a hobbyist in VR, throwing around words like tracking being the work of AI does an incredible disservice to the tech. Unless you want to get into the AI craze and trick investors to throw money at you. I'm looking at you, boss. One of the most obvious techniques is that the Quest uses advanced techniques of machine learning, with the fact that when you create a boundary, it uses points of reference in your room, like a sofa that you have, a bed, the walls, or a desk. All of these points are used as reference, so it gets a better understanding of your play space. The more data and maturity of the tech, the better it gets, like fine wine. The second technique is that both the controllers and the headset use IMUs. IMUs, initial measurement unit sensors, measure triaxial acceleration and triaxial angular acceleration. IMUs are what a lot of people call gyroscope. If you watch a 3D video on your phone and you're able to rotate it around, it is essentially that. Quest 3 IMUs send data between controllers and the headset, and both the controller and the headset have one IMU inside them each. The headset does a lot of guessing, and IMUs for the most part aren't 100% accurate. It works as if you put your controller behind your back and it still tracks itself. It's because of the IMU data, as it has what essentially is a gyroscope sensor. Lastly, third, is the cameras along with the IR lights placed along the edges of the controller and one at the bottom. With this, it acts to mitigate the controllers from drifting off or yeeting across your screen. As if you played a Quest 2 or Quest 3 game, it tells you to put the controllers back into view. It's the cameras on the headset along with the LEDs lights at work that try with the machine learning algorithm, and the IMUs give a better experience, and the IR lights give a slightly better tracking, since all these methods work in hand with each other. And with the IMUs and algorithms, they are basically just guesswork, but they do a good enough job. And the IR LEDs, for the most part, these 3 methods that Quest 3 uses are good enough. If you were to come and tell me this tech during the Paleolithic era, a new religion could have been made. A lot of this is why it's so great to not only live during this era of tech, but amazing at the price point that Quest 2 and 3 are at. Within these 3 tracking methods, at least on Quest 3, there seems to be a huge inconsistency to what is the corporate. The left controller, to me, and a lot of other users, is always at fault, whether aiming with your gun, beating your Saber, committing war crimes in Boner Lab. It all follows a clear pattern. As to why I'm making this video is that Onward is probably my most played game of all time. I have over 2,000 hours in that game that I can no longer get back, but cope with the fact that I'm pretty good at the game. I'm pretty quick on my feet when it comes to reaction times and aiming. I credit this to Beat Saber, as it allows you to build muscle memory and react without thinking. Specifically with Onward, holding SMGs, rifles, RPGs, or machine guns with 2 hands is worse than Quest 2. When holding a gun at the handguard or foregrip, it all starts adding up. With the right controller, for the most part, it does a more than a decent enough job keeping up with my movements in a lot of games. Once I noticed a pattern in the inconsistencies always being the left controller. With aiming your gun, holding it with two hands, the foregrip is always the problem. For the life of me, aiming directly straight becomes a gameplay element in itself. With Beat Saber, what controller is always drifting, leading me to miss a simple note? The left controller. Another game, not just Onward, is Les Mills Body Combat, which is a great fitness game that has you punching up, down, left, right, and is really intensive. Playing the game, it has you punch up, and on Quest this would be at eye tracking level. To me, at least, it's always the left controllers that start to drift. Other apps or games users say they encounter issues are Gorilla Tag, 11 Table Tennis, IB Cricket, and others. The machine learning algorithms, IMUs, and cameras seem to work great. With the cameras, I wouldn't say they are the problem, as hand tracking on Quest 3, even with low light environments, work really well. The IR placement of the lights is probably its biggest fault. I am more inclined to think that the tracking can be updated and fixed, leading to a more consistent experience, since inside-out tracking with the right controller works okay for the most part. And I love my Quest 3. Going from Rift S to Quest 2 to Quest 3, the upgrade is amazing. With the pancake lenses and XR2 Gen 2 on Quest 3, it does wonders to games. By far, Quest 3 is the best headset overall in its category. However, tracking on Quest 3, like overlapping of controllers, is miles better than Quest 2. Whereas on Quest 2, this is a problem in Beat Saber if you try to hit underhand notes. Quest 3 does it exceedingly well, but it is not without its faults. With Quest 3 tracking, it does make me go back to Quest 2 for Beat Saber or games apps that require intense physical movement. Spending an extra $250, one would think the controllers are overall better in every aspect, but to me, it's more of a sidestep on relying less on the IR LED lights and relying more on machine learning vision algorithms. Maybe an AI breakthrough will happen eventually where it's on par with base stations, but as of right now, Quest 3 inside-out tracking is good enough for most users, but as soon as you try to push it, it's not good enough. And with that, the Quest 2 as of right now isn't a bad pick, especially for people wanting to get into VR, and Quest 3 isn't unplayable, but it has its faults. With the Quest Lite rumored to release, with Meta and Tencent partnering up to bring it to China, maybe it's worth waiting, since it's rumored to settle around the price of a Quest 2. As an outro, I love my Quest 3 and don't hate it, but like the great Danny DeVito said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Not actually, but yeah. What are your thoughts on the given subject? Are you one of the few chosen ones having issues on your headset, or your headset tracks amazingly well? Leave a like, dislike, comment down below, sub, and until the next video, bye.